Well, you may have heard by now that there has been a Gaza hostage deal between Israel and Hamas. And I have been waiting to report anything to you because I just want to make sure I got as many details as I could. And honestly, there's still a lot of, information that's not really very clear. But let me tell you what I have found. And this is on the Jerusalem Post. And so when I'm reporting something on Israel, I feel like this is about as reliable as you can get, is going to the source there in Israel. And this is from Jerusalem Post today. This is Gaza hostage deal, how phase 1 of ceasefire deal will be implemented. It says the first phase of the deal will last 42 days, and implementation of the agreement will begin 2 or 3 days after its signing. And then it says key terms of the possible hostages ceasefire deal. And that's, it's, so they're saying they have a deal, but they're still evidently some things up in the air. But here are the key terms of the possible hostages ceasefire deal. Phase 1, 33 hostages are released. These are the Jewish hostages. None confirmed deceased. IDF begins staged withdrawal, keeping a Gaza security perimeter. Terrorists with life sentences released, excluding October 7th Nuqida fighters. Last 42 days, some IDF presence in the Philadelphia corridor. And then this is phase 2. Talks on more hostages released and further IDF withdrawal start on day 16. Security protocols for Palestinian refugees to northern Gaza. And then phase 3 is all hostages released, IDF withdraws fully only after their freedom. And Brian Schrager and I talked about this morning on the Tipping Point show. And what Brian says was that he thought that this phase 1 is going to happen, but he thought that phase 2 and phase 3 were doubtful that they would happen. Because it's talking about phase 3, basically, it's just, it goes back to the beginning. And all hostages are released, and the IDF completely withdraws from Gaza, which Netanyahu and the government says they'll never do. They're never going to allow Hamas to reconstitute and just basically prepare to attack them all over again. Let me read you some of this article that I'm going to talk about the implications. Following announcements that a ceasefire and hostage deal had been reached on Wednesday, Arab media published the alleged provisions of the deal. According to the reports, the agreement will include supervision by Qatar and Egypt over the return of refugees from the southern Gaza Strip to the north, and simultaneously the withdrawal of the IDF from the Netzarim corridor will be completed in stages. Hamas demanded that the mediators determine the time frame in which the IDF will withdraw using a timetable. President Joe Biden said that the foundations of the deal had been proposed as early as June of 2024. The first phase of the deal will last 42 days, and the implementation of the agreement will begin 2 or 3 days after its signing. The IDF will withdraw from the Netzarim corridor and all populated areas of the enclave to about 700 meters from the border, except in 5 specified areas where it will be 400 meters. The IDF will reportedly reduce its presence on the Philadelphia corridor and then withdraw from it completely over the course of the first 50 days. Israel agreed to open the Rafa border crossing a week after the agreement is implemented, and the agreement will include a protocol regarding humanitarian aid during the first phase under the supervision of the mediators. Israel is expected to begin preparations to begin the movement of aid through the crossing immediately. Israel will open the crossing to civilians after the release of all the women, both civilians and soldiers, from Hamas captivity. All wounded and sick Palestinian civilians will be allowed to leave through the Rafa crossing following its reopening to civilians. Hamas will be permitted to transfer 50 wounded operatives to Egyptian hospitals every day. However, each operative is subject to approval by both Israel and Egypt, and the crossing will remain jointly operated by Israel and Egypt. Israel will begin allowing unarmed refugees to return to the north of the Gaza Strip on foot, subject to searches in the first week. Following the first week, unarmed refugees on foot will be permitted to return north without search via the coastal Al-Rashid Street. 2 weeks later, they will be permitted to return via the central Salah al-Din road. Following the first week, the refugees will be permitted to return to the north via vehicles, which will be inspected by a private company to be determined by the mediators in coordination with Israel. The Prime Minister of Qatar confirmed that 33 hostages will be released. The women and children first, followed by the female soldiers, then men over the age of 50, and young men who are defined as humanitarian cases. In exchange, Israel will release about 2,000 convicted terrorists. It's just an unbelievable situation, including 250 who were sentenced to life imprisonment. In addition, Israel will release about 1,000 terrorists captured after October 7th. 9 sick or injured hostages are to be released in exchange for the release of 110 convicted terrorists serving life sentences. Israel will release 1,000 prisoners from Gaza, all of whom were arrested after October 8, 2023, and none were directly involved in October 7th. No terrorist involved in October 7th will be released in the deal, as previously reported by the Jerusalem Post. Elderly hostages over the age of 50 are being released at a ratio of 27 life sentence prisoners and 31 other prisoners per elderly hostage. For every one Jewish hostage released, 27 life sentence prisoners and 31 other prisoners per one elderly Jewish hostage. Abra Mengistu, held since 2014, and Hisham al-Sayed, held since 2015, will both be released at a ratio of 30 prisoners per person, plus 47 additional prisoners. Both entered the Gaza Strip while suffering from long-standing mental health issues, raising fears over their well-being. The mediators promised to issue a UN Security Council resolution supporting the declaration of a ceasefire to ensure that the parties comply with the agreement. Israel wanted to supervise the Philadelphia corridor, but this request was rejected. According to foreign media reports, Israel was convinced of the need to withdraw from the area. And this is what it says now. The reports of a withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor are a complete lie. Prime Minister Netanyahu did not give up a millimeter of Israeli control over the Philadelphia corridor, Netanyahu's spokesperson said. Israel wanted the representative at the Rafa crossing, but this was also rejected. Instead, Egypt would train the forces responsible for securing the Rafa crossing, according to the report. It was also reported that a high-ranking Egyptian delegation visited the Rafa crossing on Wednesday. So this is all the information I have, and this is a recent article from the Jerusalem Post. And so 33 hostages are going to be released, the Jewish hostages in this phase 1 deal, for around 2,000 hostages, criminals, terrorists, many of their life in prison. And it just shows you the difference in the valuation of life. The Jewish people, value every life of every person, every hostage that's there. And, I know that there are good Palestinian people. There are Christian Palestinian people. And there are people in Gaza that are innocent victims of what Hamas has done. And I feel very sorry for them, women and children, and people who are there suffering tremendously because of Hamas. And I'm happy for whatever relief they get through this, and humanitarian relief and medical relief that they get through this. Hamas will reconstitute. And this has been the concern from the very beginning. We need to get the hostages out. These hostages need to get out. And this is the heart-wrenching part of this entire situation. Israel can't just sit back and forget the hostages. That's just not who they are. That's just not the humane thing to do. But at the same time, they're trading hundreds for every person. All these hostages that are getting out, they're releasing, or dozens for every hostage. And that's the valuation of life that Israel has, and that's the way that it should be. But these terrorists that are being released, they'll go back to being terrorists. They hate Israel even more than before after being imprisoned. And so they go back to Gaza, they go to, the West Bank, wherever they go. Israel just has more problems on their hands. And so this deal is good for the families of these 33 people that are going to be released. And I'm thankful that it's women and children and elderly and all like that. They still have hostages. They still have many hostages. And so if there is a phase 2 or phase 3, that's yet to be seen. But I also want to say, thank God, for a deal. I'm thankful for every Jewish family who gets the family member back, and just a little bit of healing for Israel in the midst of this. And there were celebrations on the streets that I was watching on the news, and I'm thankful and happy for that. This is dangerous. In light of all the good, Israel is going to release thousands of hostages, thousands of terrorists who, are going to be up to no good. And so Hamas will do everything they can to reconstitute. And what they're saying, Hamas, what they're saying is, for every terrorist that Israel has killed, they've had recruits replace them. And so you have to understand, Hamas is extremely popular in that area of the world. The Palestinian people, like in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, if an election were held today, they would vote for Hamas, not Fatah, and not the Palestinian Authority to rule them. Hamas is very popular in the Middle East, in that area of the world. And so many young men see it as a badge of honor for them to join Hamas in fighting Israel. We have to remember that Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Houthis, all these people, they want to destroy the nation of Israel. That is their stated goal, is destroy the nation of Israel. So for them, this is a very honorable thing for them to be a terrorist fighting Israel, and Gaza just becomes ground zero for terrorist activity. And so what they're saying here, and what Benjamin Netanyahu's spokesman is saying, is we're not giving up the Philadelphia corridor. We're not going to compromise the security of Gaza. Now, phase 3 means IDF completely withdraws. Hey, we give you back all your hostages. Okay. I don't believe that'll happen either. I'm like Brian. I cannot see, after all they've been through, Israel trusting the Gaza Strip back to Hamas for them to start building tunnels, smuggling arms in, so on and so forth. The next time that there would be an attack, it would be 10 times worse than October 7th. Because they've learned from that, and they would do it bigger and better than ever before. Of course, Israel's not going to allow that. That's what I'm saying. They're not going to let down their guard around the perimeter of Gaza. And so Donald Trump has a tremendous amount to do with this. Now, I was a young man during Jimmy Carter's administration, and Jimmy Carter was a very weak president. He just recently passed away. He was a good man. He was known for being a good man, building homes for Habitat for Humanity and just being a good Christian man. He was not a good president. He was very weak in foreign policy, and there was the Iranian hostage crisis took place during his presidency, and Ronald Reagan, who was running for president at that time, said, the Iranians, when I get elected, I'm going to get those hostages. They better let them go right now. When he got elected, they let them go the day he took office. And so the strength of a president, we have to understand that around the world, regardless of how nice we want to be or talk about, policies or issues, Americans are at risk when we have a weak president. And Joe Biden has been an incredibly weak president. No one fears him. No one respects him in that area of the world. They have no fear and no respect for him whatsoever. He has been the best friend that Iran's ever had. He's given some support to Israel, and I appreciate that very much. But now notice 5 days before Donald Trump takes office, they're ready to talk. And that's not an accident. And there are a lot of prayers that have gone up, and what's happening right now is in response to a lot of the prayers that have gone up. But understand, it's no coincidence that they're responding to the strength of Donald Trump, and I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for the next 4 years. We've got a president that the world fears, and they fear him. Putin fears him. Xi fears him. The Iranians fear him, and the terrorists fear him. And so we need to rebuild our military. We need to understand that China is a serious enemy that means a serious harm. and they're doing everything they can to undermine us from overseas and also internally. And so we've got a lot of enemies, and we need a strong president. I thank God that President Trump is coming in. This hostage deal, we'll keep you updated on this, because right now they're still, I guess they haven't signed it. It's not clear when the hostages will be released, even though they're saying it's going to be released soon. The Israeli Knesset has to vote on it. And this is a very serious thing that's going on in the Knesset, because they're a coalition government. They're not like us, where we have Republicans and Democrats. They've got a bunch of different parties. And Benjamin Netanyahu, he has a coalition government, which means the only way he can get enough seats in the parliament is to make deals with people, go around and get this party to join his and this party to join his. And two of the parties involved, and they're a part of his coalition in the government, have said, if you sign this deal, we're out, which means they're going to have another election, and his majority falls apart. So there's just it's so tenuous. There's so many ifs in this situation. And so, praise God that 33 hostages are going to be released. I grieve in my heart that all these terrorists are going to be released. But for the sake of Israel, for the sake of those families, I'm happy. And I just believe that this phase one, hope it happens, with President Trump taking office next week. It'll be very interesting to see how things proceed. But we'll keep you updated and make sure that you're aware of. But I wait. I don't jump in and start talking. I wait until I feel like I have a picture, an understanding of the picture. And this is the best I could get so far today. So we'll keep you updated